In 1983, John and Janelle Spencer founded DCI Dental, which is now one of the largest dental equipment suppliers in the world. DCI is also one of Newberg's largest employers, and until 2022, many people in Newberg were not really familiar with DCI. But when a fire destroyed one of their main parts and assemblies buildings in April of that year, DCI quickly found itself in Newberg's spotlight. Understandably, people had a lot of questions. Would hundreds of families be displaced because of the lost jobs? Would the dental industry grind to a halt as one of the largest suppliers was no longer able to produce parts? Well, in this episode, I'll be talking to Senior Vice President Tim Murphy as he shares DCI's story. You'll learn how DCI got started, how it's changed over the years, how it's impacted Newberg, and of course, you'll learn how the community of Newberg rallied together behind DCI after the fire to pull off nothing short of a miracle. Hi, I'm Daniel Roberts, host of the Givingtown podcast, where we share stories about the people and organizations that make Newberg so great. This podcast is brought to you by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group, and we love serving this town and our amazing clients. So we'd be happy to serve you with buying or selling a home anywhere around the Newberg area. If you're interested, you can learn more about us at thejoyfulrobertsgroup.com. And with that, I hope you enjoy this episode with Tim Murphy. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me today on the Givingtown podcast. It's great to have you here and looking forward to learning more about DCI and sharing the story with the community.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So for some people who haven't really heard of DCI, maybe they've heard different things in the news, like we'll be getting on later about, the fire and things like that. But a lot of people don't really know what DCI is, or maybe they're newer to the community and don't recognize how much of a dental community we really are.
Of course.
So for those people, can you share the story of DCI, like how it got started, what your involvement is?
Absolutely. So I'm Tim Murphy, Senior Vice President at DCI, also son-in-law to the family. I married John and Janelle's youngest daughter, Laura, and they are natives to the Newberg-Dundee area. So any listeners may know my wife. Hopefully it's a big listenership, 40,000 and counting, right?
Yeah, everyone in the state.
So yeah, the story of DCI kind of has a little bit of a Google story before Google. John met and married Janelle, and they had started a family up in Dundee, had a family farm there. And John was working in the dental industry, and he was a salesman carrying a bag, selling dental equipment and dental components, replacement parts out in the field. And one day he was introduced here in Newberg to a machine shop that was making dental syringes, a component that he was selling out in the street in his handbag. And after kind of examining how it was made, asked kind of how much does this cost at raw parts and wholesale finished good. And he was surprised to find out like the margin between what he was selling out in the field versus what it was. And he's like, boy, that's a lot of margin. I'm not much of a business person, but I feel like I could make a lot of mistakes between the amount I bought it for and the amount I could sell it for. Maybe there's something here. And really at the root of the idea to start a components business, which is the legacy portion of DCI is Dental Components, and that's what the D and the C are, Dental Components International. And so for 40 years, over 40 years now, we have been servicing the world in dental components, and it started right here in Newberg and Dundee. And so back in 1983, John got John Janelle took out a $10,000 home improvement loan on their house, and they had a very small 8-page pamphlet of components that they went to market with. And over the many years, 40 years now, that we now have darn near 2,000 components in our portfolio. We are arguably the largest components and parts dealer, replacement parts dealer in the world. Almost every truck out there, technician truck that's going and repairing doctors who are down in their operatories, is half filled with our componentry. And And so that is happening right here in Newburgh. And then there's an equipment side. The family dabbled in equipment in the mid 90s to the mid 2000s. We built a brand that ended up competing against ADEC, who was number one. And so we were number two in the market. There was pressure from a big global conglomerate called Danaher, which is kind of like this GE. They came into the market with $4 billion and, bought up a bunch of companies, and we're going to kind of reshape the market. And the family was feeling pressured and didn't want to get over leveraged. So they kind of felt forced to sell the equipment side. They kept the components side. And then kind of just focused on components for the next 10 years. And during that time, Danaher did not do a very good job of honoring the brand that they bought. It more or less had kind of gone out of favor in the market and the industry. And those in the industry asked John and the family to get back into equipment, and said, "Hey, there's just no one in the market who's servicing like the middle ground." So that's what we did. The non-compete was over, and we built a new brand called DCI Edge, which is a line of core equipment, which is dental chairs, dental units, dental lights, and the cabinetry that helps build out the operatory. So a very similar offering to what our friends up the road do. They are, in layman's terms, they're the Mercedes, and we are more of a Toyota brand. So there's there's some cost difference and some feature set differences, but we're both just as robust, and we're just kind of servicing two ends of the market.
So how did Newburgh, of all places, become such? I mean, between ADEC and DCI, it almost seems like from some people that it came out of nowhere. And I imagine a major portion of our community has no clue that the vast majority of dental componentry.
For sure. Yeah. Newburgh's, the doorstep to the gateway to wine country in all, magazines and kind of outward communication. But it is, at an industry level, the home to the United States, hub of dental. It is where, dental, core equipment and cabinetry is just known to be made. Kind of the Detroit of of dental manufacturing. So yeah, with between ADEC and us, we are number one and number two. So we're the second largest and fastest growing core equipment manufacturer, and arguably we have the number one best selling dental chair in the U.S. by units. But the credit to Newburgh getting that stamp, it really dates back to the Austin. So Ken and Joanne, deciding to set up shop in the area, they really leveraged, and this is kind of story and lore passed down to me. But as I understand the facts correctly, they leveraged the idea that there were a number of machine shops kind of already set up in the Newburgh area that were already devoted to problem solving the agricultural business that kind of lays around this area, that are really that ag is kind of doing a lot of boutique stuff. So like, how do you capture filberts, from a tree efficiently? Well, let's go to a machine shop and talk about what can be made, right? And so they're fabricating things to solve problems, and that's ultimately what Ken and Joanne did. Is they found partners in this community, and ultimately what that did is create a discipline, right? So now you have Newburgh creating not just an ag discipline, but a dental discipline. And with that, they laid the groundwork, and others could come in behind and leverage that same discipline. You had, they kind of created the discipline of not only the machining, but also the employee base. So the workforce starts to get trained, and there's just a mindset starting to form. So yeah, a lot of credit goes to those founders. And I know they've been good to the city and, good to employees, and it certainly has made, companies like DCI, but also, there's five really that are big in Newburgh. So you have, ADEC, DCI, and then you have Beaver State, You also have up over the hill in the edge of Hillsborough, you have Forest and Engel. So that is a big 5 set in our industry that all live, in this kind of Newburgh region.
I'm not even familiar with the other 3. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so,
a little inside baseball.
So Alvin Elbert, who owns ARE Manufacturing, a few months back, he was on the podcast talking about how he and John kind of worked together from the very beginning. Is he still involved with DCI? Do you guys still work together with ARE?
Yeah, we've obviously, we have nearly over 200 suppliers in what we do. And, we have 10,000 SKUs of componentry that's kind of coming together to make what we make. But Alvin is certainly in the mix, and he has a certain core amount of business that we give him, but then he's also always there to get us out of trouble when something, when plan A didn't work, that, he comes through with some, neighborly help often.
Well, when you have thousands of parts, no one machine shop obviously can do that anyway, yes. Which is fascinating to me when you think about that many parts all being made. Is everything built in Newburgh or are they built?
Yeah, it's all coming here from all over the world, local and overseas. And it's making its way here, and it's built by all of our local talent.
So one of the major stories that was in the news a couple of years ago was the fire. And that fire was actually at the facility where most of the equipment was stored. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, if you look out one of these windows that we're recording from, you can see the property. So John and Janelle Spencer own that property and built the headquarters, and at that point the components business, so the DCI parts business, lived out of there. It was a 33,000 square foot building, and on the fateful night of April 10th, 2022, there was a mentally challenged gentleman. It was a Sunday evening. Nobody was in the building. He broke in and he set fire to the building, thanks to, the good work of the first responders. They took what was a 3-alarm fire. I'm not familiar too much with the number of alarms, but a fairly sizable blaze, kept it retained to the property. It didn't spread to any of the neighbors or anything like that. And it was a complete and total loss. So we got unhoused from our from our headquarters and factory. And this was a risk not only for the company, the employees, but also what I describe as a potential risk to the entire industry and world in terms of dentistry. Because I indicated we are number one in what we do in that components business. We almost created like the Panama Canal of components shortage within the industry. I know that, there are others in what we do, but they are a distant second and third. And as I understand, they were almost sold out within about 4 days of the fire, because there was a rush on them and they just couldn't keep up with the demand. So the whole industry was really feeling it. And of course, we feed our components feed into our equipment, which is downstream of that. And so we had a lot of risk and a lot of incentive to get back up and running very quickly so that we could keep our business moving.
And that's a huge part of, in my mind, the DCI and Newburgh story, all that took place. And I want to get to that and Counselor Denise Bacon and what she did. And just a lot of people came together to make that work. But I think a lot of people don't appreciate the level of kind of how catastrophic that could have been. Both, like you said, for the dental industry, for Newburgh, a lot of well-paying jobs that were nearly lost. And so what happened? I mean, so explain what that was like from, okay, the fire happened, then all of a sudden...
you want to get into the drama of the... Okay. That feeds listenership, I suppose. It was, I started getting calls. It was a Sunday evening and my phone was on Do Not Disturb or something. So I missed the first 2 or 3 calls from the local authorities who were trying to get in touch. I kind of came online around 5 a.m. and was informed of what was going on, and I started to make my way over to the building. It was at that point it seemed like they were really battling the fire between the hours of say 1 and 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and it was an all hands on deck situation. Like I said, they did a great job of keeping it, contained to the property. And when we got there, it was just a lot of cleanup and a lot of questions as to how could this have happened. And the gentleman who did in fact start the fire did the arson. He passed away inside the fire as well. So, but they did not know that or have any confirmation of that. So there was just a lot of questions, like who could have been around the building, just kind of your standard investigative questions of, geez, how did this happen? Do you have any ideas of, have you heard of this name? So on and so forth. So that all went down, and I would say we quickly, that was Sunday at 5 a.m. There was a general shock and awe moment of us just standing there watching, the smoke just still withering out, and it was April, so it was raining, and it felt like a bad movie, that we were just all just dumbfounded about. And over the course of the day, we had our employees, Ketchikan was on the news, we had people all over the region, learning about it. And then it slowly started getting passed, around text messages and whatnot to the industry. And it was just a constant flood of, oh my gosh. And so you really felt like the shock and awe from everybody. And then you had employees, kind of driving by, and they were crying, and it was a home. We have a lot of people that, work for us for anywhere from 5 to 7 to 25 years. So these were, this wasn't just, a place where you go in and punch the clock. It was their home, right? So, home away from home. So we, at that point, had a really quick, we almost all of the managers, were there, on a Sunday, standing street side. And we just said, okay, let's start, thinking about what's next. And so we, on a Sunday, just spent the next 6 hours in a conference room. Any idea was a good idea to share and beat up and figure out how we were going to make it happen. And, out of that, came the hey, what do you think about that old Rite Aid up there? Who knows whether or not that would, it's not zoned right. Okay, let's move on. Like, what's the next place? And there were people, who were ready to jump in and help, even on a Sunday afternoon. Philip Higgins with Pacific Crest. You had, Abisha Stone with Sedcor, Shannon Buckmaster, who was with the city at the time. There were just people coming out and offering their offering out their hand and help and resources of what possible next steps could be. So that was the day. That was Sunday. And so then, we had to move into, what I think, was Monday. A lot of what was just messaging to the employees. Okay, you guys stay home. We're going to kind of create a bit of a triage group that is going to work out of a small corner that maybe can, use some of the components that were still on campus and keep some of the business, feeding. And a lot of communication then started. John recorded some videos that could be sent out. John Spencer could send out to the employees so he could feel connection with them. And he let them know that, he and Janelle, no matter whether or not there was insurance, help, they promised that their pay would not stop. They would continue to get paid while we figured this out. So all the employees were feeling, okay, I'm still going to be able to support my family. And, while we figure this out, and we then moved from kind of communication mode into, triage mode of getting ourselves set up. So again, between Sedcor and, a few leaders in the city, we were able to, get all three commissioners from Yamhill County to show up to the fire. and as well to the burn site, we'll call it. So all three commissioners showed up, and then you also had Denise Bacon as a representative from the council, as well as the mayor at the time, and then we also had a few members of the city, Doug Rux and one of his planners, and then actually some of the fire chief and whatnot. And we all sat around in what was just some blistering cold rain while the fire was still smoldering, staring at the building. And the police chief kind of took us through, or the fire chief took us through kind of what we were staring at and what the next steps were for that. And then we said, okay, I'll never forget this. I said, okay, hey, we have some warm hot chocolate and whatnot down the road at a conference room. Why don't we reconvene and take this elsewhere? And I'll never forget Commissioner Sterrett said, you know what, Tim, as much as I would love a warm place to sit and hash this out, there's no better place to make a decision than standing in the freezing rain, and we can make it quicker that way. And it's like, okay, I like your style. Yeah. So I've always had a feather in the cap for Mary on that one. But that ultimately, was kind of the catalyst moment for us to approach the city for the ask to say, hey, what would serve us best is not to try and work out of a distant site, because 30,000 square feet doesn't come easily, to replace. Could we potentially use this Rite Aid? And, with there were no no's, but there was a lot of ums. And so Doug Rux, with a lot of credit to him and the city's legal team, they figured out a way to petition the state and put all the marbles into a bag and shuffle them around. And what came out was the allowance of a temporary allowance due to an emergency. And that was at first had a May of 2025 end date. And then we recently asked for an extension to May of 29. So, but I will say that particular crew, Doug Rux and his crew, did just a tremendous job of figuring out how to twist the law appropriately. And the late Denise Bacon, God bless her, she said to us, she's like, in 14 years of helping this city, she's like, I think this is the best thing we've ever done.
I think so too. And I had the opportunity to be in Rotary with Denise and hear some from her perspective. And that woman was just a force of nature. But the speed in which that happened is part of what was so incredible. Is what was the turnaround from the fire to when you were back up?
Yeah, so it was 36 days from the fire to our first shipment. And we had, that was, April 10th was the fire. I would say it was within 7 days, the city agreed to have an emergency council session. And they, at that point, had voted to allow the emergency declaration and allow the temporary space. At which point then we worked with Pacific Crest to then, negotiate within, I think it was 4 days, a commercial lease.
Wow.
And so it was a rat race all the way through, but we ended up taking the keys on like May 31st, call it. And we then set a date in the sand internally and said, we're going to ship our first product on May 15th. And we worked night and day. We had a...
Wait, so is it May 30th or what? No, April 31st? Or May 30th?
Sorry, excuse me. April 10th was the fire. We took the keys on April 31st. Okay. We set a line in the sand, or April, if there is 31st. I think there isn't. So they set we set a line in the sand of May 15th and said, okay, we are going to ship our product.
Wow.
That. And so we moved heaven and earth. We actually have this, great time lapse that we posted in our Instagram and Facebook, to show kind of us renovating this Rite Aid, in which, it's I think we did a great job of, turning an apple into an orange, and it had the bones of what we needed, but it took some work.
That is incredible. So what has it been like being over there? I mean, obviously it's not tailor-made for what you guys do. So have there been challenges, or what's it been like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's been good to us. The old ship over there. The property managers are fantastic. They are a family business as well. They were, arms out, willing to, help us out in however we needed to make this journey a little more comfortable. The biggest pain point is really the idea that we have anywhere between 80 and 120 people kind of staffed at that time, depending on the seasonality. And the parking is really a thing. I mean, that parking lot is designed for retail, for people to be kind of transiently coming and going. And there's calculations and traffic studies that, have a defined amount of things. So we get a very small defined amount of allowed parking for employees who are going to leave their car there at any given time. And the rest have about the balance of that has to shuttle in shuttle vans, which thank you listeners for being patient. If you see shuttle vans kind of zooming around town, I hope they are all being safe, but they are transporting our hardworking people during a time in an event that, we certainly don't wish this to be the case, but this is what we're doing. And we park over at the Good Life Church and we shuttle them back and forth appropriately. And kudos to all of our employees too. This is not, an ideal way to arrive at work. You all know, as you go skiing up at the mountain, parking at the lower side of Meadows and going all the way up to, that's not always an enjoyable moment, but imagine having to do that kind of every day. And kudos to the DCI employees for, having the patience and the wherewithal and seeing the future. So
speaking of the future, some people might say, oh, well, shouldn't insurance just cover it and you can rebuild? But I understand it's not that simple because there's
it's a little bit of a bag of a few variables. One, insurance is not settled yet. That's the one thing that I've learned out of this, which I hope to never leverage the skill set, is how insurance works. I mean, I've been for years negotiating the front end of insurance policies with our broker, of course. But you kind of have a loose understanding of what the buckets mean, and kind of a hypothetical sense of how much to insure in the event this hypothetical moment were to happen. Well, imagine it happens, and you quickly have a very deep understanding of what each of the insurance buckets means, and how what you are and are not allowed to leverage against the policy, and so on and so forth. So, but anyway, we are still, in over 2 years later, still battling through, a portion of this policy, and some of that is the rebuild. The site is, in the consideration set of a place to rebuild. As you drive through Newburgh, you see that DCI has multiple buildings. And as you drive along the I-5, you see that DCI has buildings down in, Marion County. So we have a 22-mile loop that we're currently working in across 9 buildings and, a church parking lot. And so, it is, our growth has, the fire didn't have anything to do with that. It was just our growth. We require, a lot of space and, for not only the people, but also the materials. So with that, we would like to use this moment. If we're going to build, can we bring it all under one roof and, really help create a better lean manufacturing, situation, which will only help, our employees and the management of the operations of the company.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've wondered, you may or may not be able to speak to this. I know right on the, I guess it'd be the west side, there's a big field right next to Newburgh Urgent Care behind where you guys were. And to me, it seems like, that'd be, just the idealistic thinking. It'd be great if you could, acquire that and build one big thing. And, I don't know if that's ever been
right off the backside of this. Yeah. So,
I don't know who 100%.
No. We do. That's all. That whole, it's a flagship. Actually, this building, and the land that the building that we're recording from is on was also part of the plot that John owns. So he sold off this plot many years back, and this building got erected at some point. So he owned up to the Burger King.
Okay.
And at any rate, yes, that whole lot is being considered. It is being considered not just for DCI, and if DCI were to find another lot, in town or close to town, the family has ideas for some form of a community center or something to give back to the community for all the years of great work that the city has just allowed to have happen here.
And I'm sure there's a lot that goes into that with planning and zoning and permits.
100%. The city, this particular grouping of the city manager and mayor and councils, I will tell you, just from kind of following along over the years, this particular grouping of people in charge of our city right now seem to all be rowing in the same direction. They seem to be very pro-business, very progress minded, and I give a lot of credit to the mayor and the city manager and all those on the council for kind of creating that leadership and that kind of single-minded customer service that I think that they've adopted. Mm-hmm. And it's been there's a lot of barriers to get out of the way when you're in development, and there's a lot of barriers to get out of the way when you're already in motion in a business in a town, and you're trying to also, kind of create a new presence that solves business problems, people problems, city problems. And but the city's been a great partner so far, and we're really hopeful for what comes out.
Yeah. When do you think if you were to make a decision, how many is this, like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years out?
No, we are intending to have a solution built and ready, call it no later than the end of 2028.
Okay.
We certainly don't want to have to go back to the city and ask for an extension, and we can't imagine that our dealings with our insurance would cause us to go that long. So I feel like we're getting close to settling, but it's certainly, we have a few more conversations. So, but it also takes time to develop something and actually erect it, right? I mean, but backing into that timeline, if we were to put something, on record, I would say that our intent is to have a new headquarters built, by 2028.
Okay. Which
at the end of 2028.
From what I understand, that means decisions are being made much sooner than that.
Mm-hmm. 100%. We are in, it's almost absorbs 50% of my day is trying to figure out what our next move is and working with the people that make that happen.
And a huge part of that, it sounds like, is the insurance and trying to say, okay, what exactly is going to come out of this?
Yeah. Insurance it's just it's a fickle beast. There's a lot of, there's a lot of funny sayings around insurance, right? It's, they have, 5 guys, they have one guy helping write a policy and collecting premiums, but 5 guys, making sure that they don't have to pay out on the other side, but it's a fickle beast. We've had some success so far, navigating it. But I think this is just the nature of the beast on these big claims. Yeah. It just happens.
Yeah. Keep those 5 guys busy. So one of the other big stories with DCI is that you were acquired by NSK, who I don't want to speak too much because I'm not super familiar with them. They are also a major dental international company, correct?
Correct.
So what is the story with that, how that all came to be?
Yeah, so they are leaders in handpieces in the world. They're number 1 in the world in what they do. They have the drills and such that go into your mouth. And those attached to kind of the end of the hosings and holster into the dental units that you would see the doctor kind of reaching for off to the peripheral of your visit, right?
Okay. So you made the components, but not the hand pieces, was that?
We make the components of the chair and unit and light, and we also we use those components to make chairs, units, and lights. And the end of the hosings that kind of come up on a unit, so that if a unit is the heart of a dental practice, meaning all the air and water is kind of pressurizing and navigating through that unit, the hoses kind of come up out of that. And at the end of a few of those hoses are hand pieces. And the others are, water and air and a few other suction, so on and so forth. But they do the hand pieces. Okay. So that's a whole kind of different segment of the business. And it's regulated differently by the FDA. There's just a whole different stratosphere it lives in. But it doesn't mean that it's not part of the same kind of family and conversation. If you were on the, dentist side who's deciding to, buy a new operatory's worth of equipment and outfit it with hand pieces and so forth. So that whole consideration set is kind of happening at the same time, just during a journey of the sales cycle. So at any rate, DCI is number 2. NSK is number 1. As I indicated, John Janelle owned an equipment company back in the mid-90s, 2000s, that they made it to number 2. When they started launching DCI Edge, they had strong desires to be number 1. And so we've kind of bootstrapped our way up to number 2 again. We're behind our friends up the road. And with that, we are looking to, get a little velocity to number 1. And so we decided to partner with a company who's a 100-year-old company in what they do. They have all of the Japanese manufacturing capabilities, which, as anyone who follows just general manufacturing capabilities, Japanese are leaders in that area. The CEO of NSK is a 3rd generation in the family. We are, now a continuing family, operating family, and the alignment between John and the NSK CEO is just uncanny. They are considered 2 of the most honorable people in our industry. They both put the customer first. They both have a strong will to create a positive culture and employee first mentality, and they all and have a great community giving piece to their puzzle. So with that, there was just amazing alignment between the 2, and it made for a very natural partner to say, okay, we've gotten ourselves this far. We need big investments to make it to the next level. And NSK was just a very natural fit after some good conversation.
Yeah. So what does that mean for DCI moving forward?
One day I'll be sitting here and I'll tell you we're the number 1 selling core equipment manufacturer. But that's the goal, is that we're number 1. Every day we wake up and, collectively we now just have a larger resource body, right, to pull from. Every day we wake up and we think of dental, we think of how to become number 1. What's the best way to service our customers? What's the best way to win the sales at the street? And we now have the resources to do it.
Yeah. You mentioned you guys have been growing pretty quickly. Do you have numbers on what the growth has been over the past decade or whatever
Yeah. We've had, over, 265% growth in 6 years.
Wow. That's significant, to say the least.
Yeah. It's been, just hand over fist. The rocket ship has just been shaking nonstop, and just, propulsion up. And we're kind of hitting that moment where we needed a little bit of nitrous in the fuel tank to punch through this last wall. And that's where we are.
So do you feel like that growth rate trajectory is going to continue? It sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah. The certainly early growth is a little bit easier to capture in large sums. And that's earned, I mean, through 40 years of being, a good manufacturer. There were a lot of early adopters more than kind of a natural no name in the business. So we were able to really kind of catch some early adopters and early believers in what we were doing. So kind of just for a long time, as we were able to kind of capture market share, but things are starting to slow down a little bit because that early wins are moving down, and now we have to be more innovative,
stabilizing the rocket, make sure it doesn't blow up. Right?
Yeah, right, sure, yeah, but now it comes down to kind of brass tacks of being more innovative, being relevant in the right ways, servicing the customer, the right way, having, good quality out the door every time. Just some principles that really kind of set you apart as the decision you always want to make if you're a doctor or if you're a sales rep selling to a doctor and choosing which manufacturer you want to put forward. You want to sell to a doctor something that you believe in yourself. And so the more we prove to the market that we are a very robust, value-oriented option, that if you have a desire for design and also some fiscal responsibility, we're the choice.
Yeah. What makes you excited, like moving forward? I'm sure there's a lot that you have on your plate. You mentioned like 50% of it's just growth, but
no, I've personally, I'm excited to see where this brand goes. I have 15 years leading up to joining the family and the family business in advertising and helping launch brands. How I made it out to the Pacific Northwest, originally from Philadelphia, and I was working for an agency that had won some of the Microsoft business. And so I was brought out to bring Microsoft and Nike together on a project. And that's kind of how I got out here, and I met Laura and ultimately found myself in, taking some of my skill set into the family business and helping these guys grow. And it's just fun to now be on the inside of what is a winning brand. I mean, being part of a winning brand, a winning team, being able to, walk down the hallway and just continue. We have this bell that we ring when good things happen. And, it's awesome to hear that bell, right? Like when yes, I mean, my day is often filled with a few trying to clear out the mud of where we're headed. But that's kind of the exciting part. There is an entrepreneurial spirit that runs through what we do. John and Janelle have that founding blood still running through the pipeline, and it's entrepreneurial. It's like we don't want to get so corporate or so process oriented that we can't have some grit and in our DNA. I mean, only a company that has grit in their DNA can have a total lost fire and be operational again in 36 days.
Yeah.
All right. And so with that, we haven't been beaten down. And you have to remember that was April of 2022, which was just at the tip of coming out of COVID, right? Yeah. So, right where everyone's kind of at their exhaustion rate, we get, hit with one more big Mike Tyson slump, punch to the face. And everyone just with tenacity and grit, just pushed through it and did it. And I tell you, there's, if anyone out there, ever finds themselves checking out a resume of someone who's spent any time with DCI, I firmly recommend them, because if they were part of a team that spent any time in the last 3 to 5 years with us, they know how to work.
Yeah. One of the questions I ask everyone kind of as we close out, and given your role in Newberg with a company like DCI, what gives you hope for the future of Newberg?
I tell you, I think I tapped on it a little bit. The team that is running Newberg now, representing Newberg and being the leaders.
I think running is fair.
Those at the top of the hill, they're doing a good job. They're like I said, they're rowing in the right direction together. I think they're figuring out what they want the town to be when it grows up. And they're kind of knocking down one barrier at a time. They're not letting regulation be regulation for the sake of regulation. They're examining if barriers are there for a reason, or if they were just put there many moons ago by a nameless, person, and no one can explain, what the purpose was, and it serves no purpose today. Then they say, let's move past that. Let's put that aside and think about current events and what our future needs are, based on today's variables. And so, big kudos to them. With us growing and ADEC continuing to be leaders, you have a very significant portion of the overall market share of this industry lives in this town. And that is very healthy for a town to have, it's great for tourism to have wine and being able to cater to people who are kind of coming through to enjoy, weekend dollars. But both DCI and ADEC are two companies who are hosting doctors from all over the country and dealers every week. Like, we're bringing people into this town every week. I mean, we were just having lunch with the gentleman who's opening up the new hotel around the corner here, and it's I think going to be a Marriott Bonvoy, and we're already in conversations about the 300 to 600 visitors we plan on bringing to them, in the coming year, and how do we how can we be partners in that? So it's when you have industry and tourism kind of hitting this Venn diagram, I think there's nothing but options of positivity for a town.
That's interesting. It reminds me, it really is an ecosystem, and it's something that is probably underappreciated of how everything works together. And if you can't have a tourism industry without people who have the resources to come here. And,
right.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. Well, Tim, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time here today and for what you're doing with DCI. I know you have an integral part of that. It's a very important part of our community, and your leadership is much appreciated, I'm sure, by everyone that works for you. And great to hear the story and some of the color on what happened with the fire and what's next. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Giving Town podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think might benefit from hearing it. While more and more people are continuing to hear about this podcast, I still need your help to spread the message about all the people and organizations that make Newburgh so great. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.